Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Chris here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 4 of What If Izuku was the host of the Blacklight virus. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So we begin. The security sirens of UA High blared loudly throughout the campus of the academia. Flashing red lights shined through the windows of each and every floor of the school. This caused much chaos for the student body, but even though the teens panicked within the halls of the school, the ones who felt shook to their core were the school staff. Aizawa, along with Cementos and some of the school security, crouched down to investigate damage on the school gate. It seemed to have been completely disintegrated, which completely went against the original hypothesis for the alarm to activate. The ebony-haired man remained silent as he seemed deep in thought while analyzing the damage. How did anyone from the outside get through? Unless... His thoughts were cut short as the educator was called away for a staff meeting with the principal. The following day, Class 1A were informed that they would be leaving campus for their hero studies. They were told that they could either bring their entire costumes or portions of it, as they would be responsible for lugging around any equipment that they brought along. Before the students left the classroom, however, Aizawa had informed them that they would be joined by a guest student for the day. This confused the heroes in training, as they believed that they had met every hero major as they all shared a large dorm. Our guest is already waiting downstairs, probably already in the bus. Do be on your best behavior. This means you, Bakugo. The tired-eyed man glared at the blonde bombardier who grit his teeth and performed an obscene gesture which garnered the ire of most of his classmates. All the while, Kirishima tried to calm down his friend. Eraser had proceeded to leave the room and lead the students down towards the awaiting bus that was bound for the USJ. Ida attempted to organize the anxious teens into groups for them to board the transports, but sadly most of his words were ignored as they grouped up and split off. The disheartened, navy-haired boy sighed heavily as he proceeded to the bus where his friends had entered. As the explosive youth entered the bus, he witnessed a sight that once again shook him to his core. The sight of a green-haired teen sitting at the back of the bus. His head hung low as he seemed to be in sort of a meditative state, while he waited for the transport to be on its way. For a mere second, Bakugo stood there in silence, wondering if this was just another stress-induced hallucination, or if this was truly reality. This frozen state was broken down by Kirishima, who bumped into the blonde as he entered the bus. The redhead apologized for the movement, but didn't seem to worry about suffering repercussions. From behind the two, Shinzo, Monoma, and Todoroki entered, noticing the juniper-haired boy as well. So you're our little guest! What a thrill to join the amazing Class 1A! Wouldn't you say, newbie? Shouted the bombastic blonde as he rushed towards the black-garbed boy in the back. He began to laugh and pose dramatically, as he tended to do, but this only garnered a slight response. Lifting his head, his green eyes locked with the blonde's, which caused chills to travel up and down his spine. For a moment, the blonde was uncharacteristically silent, which surprised the purple-haired boy that had already taken his seat. Usually it took a good brainwashing for Monoma to be quiet, but it seemed that this boy, in just a single glance, did the same thing. Could it be that his quirk was similar to his own? This question remained in the boy's mind as he decided that it's best if he found out by other means, as the brunette had a sense of danger surrounding him. You can see him? You can see him! Stuttered the boy before he repeated himself in his typical loud, obnoxious voice. The others in the bus raised a brow at the question before nodding slightly. Kirishima attempted to understand the strange behavior exhibited by the ashen blonde as he placed a hand on the teen's shoulder. This was immediately shrugged off as Bakugo balled up his fist and stomped towards the still unmoving boy. You bastard! How are you still alive? The teen then reached forward and without thinking, lifted the brunette by his vest and forced a direct interaction. Bakugo grit his teeth hard as his eyes began to dampen. The one he had considered his best friend as a child, and later his victim, once thought dead and buried, was alive and in the flesh before him. A year's worth of guilt poured out of him like a raging fire as he tightened his grip on the boy's vest. Why won't you answer me, goddammit? Spit it out, Deku! The name Deku echoed within Patient Zero's mind, as it seemed to awaken dormant memories. But just when they were at the cusp of being fully unlocked, the connection severed as the ashen blonde attempted to shake him. Suddenly jerking his head upward, the two locked eyes as a once emerald green now shined red like blood. Bakugo's blood grew cold, but even through the instinctive fear and the desire to run, his resolve would not allow him to loosen his grip, though this may be out of his control, as he could feel the green-haired boy's cold palm squeezing his wrist, which became a vice-like hold that gave him immense pain. Hey, Bakubro! Chill out! Yeah, Bakugo, leave the new kid alone, replied both Kirishima and Shinzo, though their worries for their guest would shift to Bakugo as the grip on his wrist would suddenly cause him to fall to one knee. Midoriya stood above his former bully, his memories still hazy regarding their so-called friendship, though the host of the Blacklight virus could feel some distant feelings of admiration and hostility. Bakugo, huh? It seems you knew me from before, spoke the boy in a low, emotionless tone which just made the situation eerie. The Ashen Blonde tried forcing the apathetic boy to release the hold on his wrist, but it was to no avail. It was as if he was being held by steel. The hold was slowly intensifying, causing Bakugo to yelp in pain while he bit down so hard that his teeth threatened to crack. Do yourself a favor. Keep your hands to yourself, or... At the end of his sentence, the grip strength suddenly increased by nearly double, which caused Bakugo to let out a scream. Suddenly being lifted in the air by one arm, the two's eyes met once more. But now the roles had been reversed. Alright, Kacchan? The nickname that once represented the admiration for the blonde suddenly caused the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. The usually confident and arrogant teen was reduced to a helpless boy as he was suddenly dropped and fell to his knees. Holding onto his wrist, Bakugo growled beneath his breath as he tried to compose himself, but he failed to do so. Whoever this Izuku was no longer the same boy he tormented for years. No, he seemed birthed from Bakugo's own nightmares. The sudden turn of events caused the students of Class 1A to stare in shock and confusion. Kirishima, for one, froze in place with his mouth agape, while it had only garnered a side glance from Todoroki, who barely turned to witness the altercation. The purple-haired boy simply whistled, demonstrating that he was impressed by the show of force. All the while, Izuku walked to the front of the bus and took a seat in an empty row. Bakugo, are you okay? Asked Kirishima as he began approaching the blonde. He placed his hand on the shaken teen's shoulder, but it was immediately slapped away. The teen stood and sat in the corner of the bus, showing that he clearly wanted to be left alone for the remainder of the trip. Before we get back to the video, I'd like to talk about our new channel, Celestia, our channel dedicated to all things Dungeons & Dragons. Currently, we have a series breaking down the different spells in D&D, and soon we'll be starting some new series as well. So if you're a fan of D&D, or have an interest in learning about it, check it out. Additionally, if there's something you've always wanted to see get made into a video, head over there and leave a comment mentioning it. The entire bus became silent for several minutes until the doors closed now that everyone was settled. The large transport pulled out of the school campus and began its way towards the USJ. The trip seemed rather standard, going through the gates of UA and onto the main road. In prior years, the drive would have been rather quick as traffic would usually be light, but in lieu of the current crisis, many roads have been diverted, causing a delay. The bus driver honked their horn continuously to rush the near-still movement of vehicles, though this mundane movement would soon be interrupted as the sound of a distant explosion caught everyone's attention. The students would stand up and begin looking out through the left side window which faced the city. Within a blocked-off sector of the city, a tank could be seen being lifted somehow from below. A large, rather obese-looking creature, wearing a tattered yellow hooded jacket, howled as it proceeded to tear through the armored vehicle as if it was made of cardboard. A rain of bullets began showering the creature, but rather than penetrating the mutated flesh of the creature, they would bounce off and ricochet throughout, hitting other soldiers in the process. In one swift movement, an individual pounced towards the creature and landed a devastated kick that sent the creature soaring. The combination of a rubber-like body and destructive striking force slingshot the beast so far that it flew out of the city streets and over the main road where the UA shuttle bus was located. The yellow-clad monster impacted a car, crushing its bonnet and leaving the vehicle inoperable. Keep calm. If things go south, I'll go out and allow you time to escape, said Aizawa as his eyes began shining red and his capture scarf levitated. Though before he could take action, the same speedy fighter that assaulted the mutated man in the city jumped onto the main road and landed a dropkick on the infected, sending it off-road and into an open field. Come on, fat gum, is that all you've got? A little virus gets you and now you've gone soft, shouted an athletic woman with long rabbit-like ears as she brushed her long white locks from her face. Cracking her knuckles, the superhuman fighter got into her combat stance and cockily grinned at her opponent, who was apparently a former pro hero. The members of Class 1A shifted from one side of the shuttle bus to follow the fight. Suddenly, the gray-haired youth, Mineta, slammed his face to the glass as a small trail of blood began trailing down his nostrils. That's Mirako! Oh my god, she's so hot! After stating his lascivious comment, a fist impacted the top of his skull, sending him to the ground unconscious. only for Kirishima to gasp audibly upon noticing the garb of the mutated creature that screeched loudly at the woman. No way, man! That's Fat Gum's hero costume! The teens looked at each other for a moment before growing silent. If such an outstanding, selfless, and downright powerful hero was turned, what hopes were there for them? While most of Class 1A's students became quiet and somber, another left the shuttle in silence. The wrecked car had trapped a woman inside who was desperately attempting to free herself, as she was the closest to the battle at hand. Along with the civilian were two small children, their clothes wet with tears as they shrieked in terror while trying and failing to undo their seatbelts. As the possibly concussed mother reached out for her crying children, it was clear that they were in a dire situation if assistance didn't arrive. The woman had been hit in the head and blood was streaming from her brow. In addition, her car's engine had been pushed into the cabin, pinning her onto her seat, making escape impossible. When all hope had been lost, the side doors of the car were torn off their hinges. The light flashed behind the individual that showed an incredible feat of strength. Showing it was the emerald-haired youth, Izuku Midoriya. Throwing the doors to the side, the boy reached within the back seat and quickly released the children so they could escape the now smoking vehicle. The woman had gone unconscious due to the toxic fumes and blood loss, which means there was little time to waste. Midoriya's arm suddenly was covered in black biomatter, which turned into a large hulking arm. Using his bio-enhanced limb, he dug his fingers into the metal that crumbled like aluminum beneath his grip, and separated the entire front portion of the car from the main cabin, releasing the woman. The sound of crunching metal caught not only his classmates' attention on the shuttle, but of the wild infected hero. Dashing towards the car, the beast with tremendous strength and speed managed to backhand Mirako, sending her to the ground from the hit. "Get out of here, brat!" shouted the rabbit woman as she attempted to recover and chase after the creature. Though as it began approaching, Midoriya grabbed the displaced part of the car and threw it at the former Fat Gum, sending him reeling back from the impact. Picking up the woman, Midoriya calmly walked towards the shuttle bus with the two children following him closely, taking hold of his pant legs. Aizawa rushed out and assisted Midoriya by picking up the children and getting them inside. The Gurnet walked inside the bus and laid the woman down on a bench-like section of the bus. The ebony-haired man was furious as his red glare hit the boy, but due to his bravery, punishment would have to come later. Mirko continued her battle with the beast after recovering for just a moment, bobbing and weaving through the surprisingly nimble creature's strikes. Just when her stamina was beginning to deplete, a winged man swooped down and struck the creature with two large blade-like feathers. Though due to the creature's extremely thick skin and regeneration, it did little but stun it momentarily. "Mind if I cut in?" chimed in the feathered man, as he twirled his feather blades hovering above the ground, his sight never strayed from the infected. The rabbit woman spat out a glob of blood before cracking her neck and stepping forward. "This is fun as hell, but we gotta end this quick, Hawks. Too many civilians and the napalm crew's running late." She began to hop in place before running forward at blinding speeds, showing now that major casualties were distant and she would no longer be holding back. Upon reaching the creature, she immediately performed a roundhouse kick that made the obese monstrosity's jaw crack upon impact. "Sorry, Fat Gum." "Luna Arc!" Swinging her leg upwards, the rabbit woman, using all her strength, landed a vicious axe kick which drilled the creature's head into the ground, causing a small impact crater beneath them. "Not enough! Luna, fall!" shouted the woman as she punched upwards with all her might, then shot her kick downwards towards the creature, digging it further into the ground. Jumping back, she flipped mid-air and landed in a heroic pose, hoping that would be enough to end the encounter. After a few seconds of silence, the ground began to quake as the creature started to move once more. Her eyes widened as the once obese creature began to smoke as its fat burned out, reducing its bulk but replacing it with a thin yet muscled physique. Though due to the mutations, it still looked closer to an ogre than its former form. In a flash, the former hero charged Mirko before a rain of bladed feathers began blasting the mutant. The creature continued charging towards the rabbit woman, even though its flesh was being torn to ribbons. Getting ready to block and counter the strike, Mirko stood strong as she balled up her fist, ready for battle. "Don't let him hit you! He's still using his quirk!" Hearing this warning, the pro hero remembered the logistics of Fat Gum's quirk. With the amount of force and attacks that the infected hero had received would result in an immensely powerful counterblow. The beast wrenched back a mighty fist that was targeted towards the fighter at great speeds, but luckily, hand-to-hand combat was her specialty. Once the two were close range, Mirko jumped into the air and wrapped her legs around the creature's head, trapping it in an ironclad vice. "Special move! Luna Tigeras!" In one fell swoop, the woman used every ounce of strength in her legs, violently twisting her body and severing the creature's head from its body instantly. Along with the detached head came the body crashing to the ground. The woman flipped mid-air and landed on her feet as she began breathing heavily from the ridiculous amount of exertion used. "Hawks, keep the thing split! Wouldn't want it getting back up," ordered the woman as the pro sent several of his bladed feathers to repeatedly cut through the downed infected. Soon after, armored vehicles arrived at the scene. Soldiers began exiting the convoys as troops of soldiers wielding flamethrower-like weapons surrounded the body. Pulling back his feathers, the military immediately set flame to the corpse, which seemed to move slightly as it burned. Ambulances began arriving at the scene, looking for any signs of need. They were quickly flagged down by Aizawa, who brought out the unconscious woman and assisted the paramedics, lifting her onto the gurney and into the back of the vehicle. The children were taken in tears by the small number of police officers that arrived with emergency services. Soon after, traffic had dissipated and the road was cleared for continued movement. Aizawa entered the shuttle, where he saw his students with tear-filled eyes and saddened expressions. "Enough of that. As heroes, this is our reality. Luckily, no one in our vicinity was injured due to the intervention of other heroes and Mr. Midoriya here." The tired man glared at the boy and sighed as he knew that in the end, he did the right thing and saved a life at that moment. Looking back at the bus driver, the two nodded as the shuttle bus began moving once more towards its original location. "We must not allow the sacrifices that other heroes are making to be in vain. You will all grow into admirable heroes one day, or at least most of you will. This current epidemic will pass like all the others, and one day things will return to normal. So this is my challenge to you. Become heroes, and be tomorrow's hope for the future." The usually irritable man seemed to speak from the heart, which lifted the spirits of a great deal of the students. Dread now replaced with determination. Bakugo, on the other hand, had remained in the back of the bus the entire time, observing the events in silence. The camera on his smartphone snapped an image of the brunette who sat several rows in front of him. Now that his former victim was revealed to be alive, it was time to see if he was kept a secret only from him or from his loved ones as well. Proceeding to text the image to his mother, it was quickly replied with one question. "Katsuki, who is that?" "I told you. I'm not insane. That bastard's alive. Deku survived." "Don't tell anyone else. I'm gonna speak with Inko." "Whatever." The matriarch of the Bakugo clan sat in silence as she gripped her phone tightly. Mitsuki took a moment to compose herself as she grabbed her coat and mask and walked out towards the home of her old friend. After a rather fast-paced walk, she arrived at Midoriya's apartment complex. Rather out of breath, the blonde-haired woman began knocking on the door rapidly, her desperation apparent. Moments passed before the locks on the door began to unlock and then opened, revealing a black-haired man with a slight beard. His eyes had deep bags and his overall appearance seemed unkempt. For a moment, Mitsuki did not recognize the man, but as a small puff of smoke escaped the man's mouth, it clicked. "Hisashi?" The man nodded, but for the time being, he did not recognize the woman standing in front of him. She quickly reintroduced herself, as it had been many years since they had interacted, if at all. She stated that she had very important news that concerned the two. Nodding in agreement, the man welcomed Mitsuki into their home. Contrary to Hisashi's appearance, the home was well kept, but strangely, there were many closed boxes that seemed to have supplies for an infant. "Inko, Mitsuki's here. She says she needs to speak to us. Could you come down?" called out the fire breather for his spouse, who soon entered the scene. When the blonde woman looked back, her eyes widened at the sight. The green-haired woman had a large pregnancy belly and seemed to have lost much weight in the process. Placing her hands over her mouth, she held back her shock as she reached out and embraced her old friend. "I need to talk to you. To both of you." The three sat down in the living room silently, confusion still going rampant between the couple. While Mitsuki fiddled with her phone, she began searching through her gallery until coming upon the picture sent to her by her child. It seems Izuku's still alive. She shared her phone screen as the clear image of their long-thought-dead son caused both parents to turn pale. Inko stared at the phone silently for several seconds before fainting into her husband's arms. Mitsuki and Hisashi quickly reached for the unconscious woman. All the while, Hisashi seemed to be going through a whirlwind of emotions. "Tell me everything you know," said the man in a serious note as he grabbed the phone and looked at the picture once more. A cloud of smoke blasted from his nostrils. Thank you all for sticking around to the end, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Before you leave, we'd just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. all the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.